The wedding dress hung in the corner of the barn like a white ghost, mocking everything Clara had become. She stood 7 feet tall now, her frame dwarfed by the cavernous space around her, yet somehow still too large for the world she'd once known. The zipper running down her back felt like a seam holding together two different versions of herself, the woman she was 3 months ago, and this trembling giant she transformed into. James Carver, the rancher who'd agreed to this arrangement, stood in the doorway with his weathered hands clasped behind his back. His eyes, the color of storm clouds over Montana plains, studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. At 6 feet himself, he was one of the few men who didn't have to crane his neck to meet her gaze, though she still had inches on him now. "The ceremony's in 2 hours," he said, his voice gravel and honey mixed together. "You need help with that dress." Clara's hands flew to her back, protective, defensive. "I can manage." "Can you?" He stepped into the barn, boots crunching on scattered hay. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like you're about to bolt. And we both know you can't afford to do that." The words hit like a physical blow because they were true. The medical bills from her condition, gigantism, the doctors called it, caused by a tumor pressing on her pituitary gland, had buried her family in debt. Her father's ranch was weeks from foreclosure. James Carver had made an offer that seemed like something from a fever dream: marry him, and he'd pay everything. Every single debt. In exchange, she'd become his wife, help him run his ranch, give him the companionship he claimed to need. It was transactional. Cold. But it was survival. "I'm not bolting," Clara said, lifting her chin. "I gave my word." James moved closer, and she caught the scent of pine and leather, of open spaces and something wild she couldn't name. "Your word." "Right. But you're shaking so hard I can hear the beads on that dress rattling from here." She was shaking. Her entire body trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. Not from fear of James exactly, but from the sheer enormity of what she was about to do. She was 23 years old, and she was marrying a stranger to save her family. A stranger who looked at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve, piece by piece. "The zip is stuck," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't reach it properly, and it keeps catching." James was behind her in 3 strides. She felt his presence like heat from a fire, too close, too consuming. His fingers brushed the top of her spine, finding the zipper's pull, and she flinched. "Please," the word escaped before she could stop it. "Don't unzip my clothes." He paused, and she could feel his breath against the back of her neck. "Clara. I'm not trying to undress you." The zipper's caught on the fabric. "I'm trying to fix it so you can actually wear this dress to our wedding. Unless you'd rather get married in those jeans?" Heat flooded her cheeks. Of course. She'd been so lost in her own spiral of anxiety that she'd misunderstood completely. "I'm sorry. I just—" "You're terrified," he interrupted, his voice softer now. "I get it. This whole situation is insane. But here's what's going to happen. I'm going to fix this zipper. You're going to put on this dress. We're going to stand in front of that preacher and say words that'll legally bind us together. And then we're going to figure out how to make this work. One day at a time." His fingers worked the zipper with surprising gentleness, freeing the caught fabric. The sound of it sliding down her back seemed impossibly loud in the quiet barn. Cool air touched her skin, and she realized the dress had been too tight, restricting her breathing. She gasped, drawing in oxygen like she'd been drowning. "Better?" James asked. "Yes," she whispered. "Good. Now let me help you adjust this properly before you pass out from lack of air. You're going to be my wife, Clara. That means I'm going to take care of you. Whether you like it or not." The church was small, tucked between rolling hills that seemed to go on forever under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Clara stood at the altar in her adjusted wedding dress, the fabric now sitting properly against her frame, and wondered if she might actually be sick. Her stomach churned with a mixture of dread and something else she couldn't identify. Something that had started in the barn when James's hands had touched her back with such unexpected care. The preacher, an elderly man named Father Mackenzie, smiled at them both with eyes that had seen too many weddings to be fooled by the stiffness between bride and groom. Clara's parents sat in the front pew, her mother dabbing at tears that might have been joy or grief or both, her father's face carved from stone. James's side of the church held his ranch hands, a collection of weathered men who watched the proceedings with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. "Do you, James Robert Carver, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Father Mackenzie's voice filled the small space. "I do." James's answer came without hesitation, his eyes locked on Clara's face. "And do you, Clara Marie Thompson, Take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband. Clara's mouth went dry. This was it. The moment that would change everything. Once she said those words, there was no going back. She'd be bound to this rancher, this stranger who'd bought her hand in marriage like she was livestock at auction. The thought made her want to scream. But then she looked past James to where her father sat, his shoulders bowed under invisible weight, and she remembered why she was doing this. For family. For survival. For a chance to keep the only home she'd ever known. I do, she said, and the words felt like surrender. Father Mackenzie pronounced them husband and wife. James leaned forward, and for one heart-stopping moment, Clara thought he might actually kiss her. But he simply pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so unexpectedly tender that her eyes stung with unshed tears. The reception was held at James's ranch, a sprawling property that made her father's land look like a hobby farm. The main house was a beautiful two-story structure with wraparound porches and windows that caught the afternoon light like captured gold. Clara moved through the gathering in a daze, accepting congratulations from people whose names she'd never remember, eating cake she couldn't taste. James stayed close, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back, guiding her through conversations with his neighbors and business associates. To anyone watching, they might have looked like a real couple. But Clara felt the performance in every smile, every careful touch. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, James leaned down to whisper in her ear. Time to head inside. People will expect us to retire early. The implication hung heavy between them. Wedding night. Consummation. Clara's heart began to race again, that familiar trembling returning to her limbs. She'd been so focused on getting through the ceremony that she hadn't let herself think about what came after. James must have felt her tension because his hand tightened slightly on her back. Breathe, Clara. Just breathe. They said their goodbyes and made their way to the main house. The interior was masculine but comfortable, with leather furniture and wooden beams crossing the high ceilings. James led her up the stairs to the second floor, down a hallway lined with photographs of landscapes and horses, until they reached a door at the end. This is the master bedroom, he said, pushing it open. Our bedroom now. The room was large, dominated by a king-sized bed that suddenly seemed to take up all available space in Clara's vision. Her trembling intensified, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together against the panic rising in her chest. Please, she said again, that same word from the barn. I need time. I know this is our wedding night, but I'm not ready for. James held up a hand, stopping her stumbling words. Clara. Look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I'm not going to touch you, he said clearly. Not tonight. Not until you're ready. This marriage might have started as a business arrangement, but I'm not a monster. You need time to adjust to all of this, and I'm going to give it to you. Relief flooded through her so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. Thank you. Don't thank me for basic decency. He moved to a door on the far side of the room. This connects to another bedroom. I'll sleep there until you tell me otherwise. The bathroom's through that door. Your things were brought up earlier. Try to get some rest. He started to leave, then paused at the connecting door. Clara? For what it's worth, I know this isn't what you wanted. But I'm going to do everything I can to make this work. To make you happy here. You have my word on that. Then he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him, leaving Clara alone in her wedding dress in a stranger's bedroom, wondering what exactly she'd just committed herself to. Dawn broke over the ranch with the kind of savage beauty that reminded Clara why she'd fallen in love with Montana in the first place. She stood at the bedroom window, still wearing the slip she'd slept in, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through the events of yesterday, trying to make sense of the man she'd married. James Carver was not what she'd expected. She'd braced herself for cruelty, or at best, cold indifference. Instead, he'd shown her patience. Kindness, even. But Clara had learned long ago that kindness could be its own kind of trap. Men who started gentle could turn cruel once they had what they wanted. A knock at the connecting door made her jump. Clara? You awake? Yes, she called back, pulling on the robe that had been laid out for her. James opened the door, already dressed in work clothes, worn jeans, a flannel shirt, and boots that had seen better days. He looked comfortable in his skin in a way Clara envied. Breakfast is ready downstairs. Then I want to show you around the ranch. If we're going to make this marriage work, you need to understand what you've gotten yourself into. The kitchen was warm and smelled of coffee and bacon. A woman in her 50s stood at the stove, her gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. She turned when they entered, her face breaking into a smile. "Mrs. Carver. Welcome home. I'm Elena, the housekeeper. I've been with Mr. James since he bought this place 5 years ago." Clara blinked at the title. Mrs. Carver. That was her now. "Please, call me Clara." "As you wish, dear. Sit, sit. You both must be starving." The meal was delicious, but Clara could barely eat. She was too aware of James across the table, the way he watched her between bites, like he was trying to figure out what made her tick. When they finished, he stood and offered her his hand. "Come on. Time for the grand tour." The ranch was enormous. James walked her through the stables first, introducing her to horses with names like Thunder and Sage and Whiskey. His hands were gentle on the animals, and they responded to him with obvious trust. Clara found herself relaxing slightly, watching him work. "You know horses?" he asked, noticing her interest. "I grew up on a ranch, remember? I might not have your operation scale, but I know my way around livestock." Something shifted in James's expression. Approval, maybe. "Good. I was worried you'd be completely out of your element here. This ranch runs with about 40 head of cattle, 20 horses, and more work than 10 people could handle. I've got 5 full-time hands and 3 part-timers, but during calving season, everyone pitches in. Including my wife." The way he said the last word made Clara's stomach tighten. "I'm not afraid of work." "No," James agreed, his eyes tracing the length of her. "I don't imagine you are. But we need to talk about your condition. The gigantism. The doctor said it could get worse, right?" Clara's defenses slammed into place. "Is that a problem? Having a wife who's taller than average?" "Don't twist my words." James's voice was sharp. "I'm asking because I need to know what to expect. If you're going to have episodes or need medical care, I need to be prepared. This isn't about your height, Clara. It's about your health." The fight drained out of her. He was right, and she hated that he was right. The tumor is still there. Growing slowly. They want to operate, but the surgery is risky. I could end up with permanent nerve damage or worse. So for now, we're just monitoring it. "And you'll keep growing?" "Probably. An inch or 2 more, maybe. The doctors aren't sure." James nodded slowly, processing this information. "Okay. We'll deal with it as it comes. But Clara, you need to tell me if something changes. If you're in pain or if symptoms get worse. Promise me." "Why do you care?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "You bought yourself a wife to avoid being alone. You got what you paid for. My medical problems are my own." James moved fast, closing the distance between them until he stood inches away. Even with her extra height, his presence was overwhelming. "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. You're not something I bought. You're my wife. That means when you hurt, I care. When you're scared, I care. And when you're growing a tumor that could kill you, I definitely care. So stop acting like this is purely transactional, because it stopped being that the moment you said I do." "Got it?" Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with such raw honesty, such fierce protectiveness. It terrified her more than any cruelty could have. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "I know." James's voice softened. "But you will. Give it time." He led her father into the ranch, showing her the cattle pens, the equipment sheds, the feed storage. He explained how everything worked, the seasonal rhythms of ranch life, the challenges they'd face in the coming months. Clara listened, absorbing information, feeling something unexpected unfurling in her chest. Hope. Maybe this could work. Maybe James Carver was exactly who he appeared to be, a good man trying to build a life with someone who needed saving as much as he needed companionship. Or maybe she was being foolish, letting her guard down too soon. Only time would tell. 3 weeks into the marriage, Clara found her rhythm. She woke before dawn, worked alongside the ranch hands until sunset, and fell into bed exhausted each night. James kept his distance physically, but they developed an easy companionship that surprised them both. They talked over meals about ranch business, about politics and books and nothing at all. Slowly, carefully, they were building something. Then the storm hit. It came out of nowhere, a late-season blizzard that turned the world white in minutes. Clara was in the north pasture checking fence lines when the first flakes started falling. By the time she realized how serious it was, visibility had dropped to almost nothing. "Clara." James's voice crackled over the radio clipped to her belt. "Where are you?" "North pasture," she shouted back, already trying to orient herself. Near the creek. Get back to the house now. This thing's going to be bad. She tried. She mounted her horse and turned toward where she thought the house was, but the snow came down so thick she couldn't see past her horse's ears. The wind howled like something alive and angry, cutting through her layers like they were made of paper. The horse stumbled, panicking, and Clara had to fight to keep her seat. She could feel the animal's terror, could feel her own rising to match it. Her fingers were going numb despite her gloves. Her face burned with cold. "James," she called into the radio. "I can't see anything. Stay calm." His voice was tight with worry. "I'm coming for you. Can you hear the bell?" Clara strained her ears and caught it, the emergency bell from the barn, ringing steadily through the storm. James must have set it going to give her something to follow. She turned the horse toward the sound and prayed she wasn't making a terrible mistake. Time became meaningless. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Clara's body shook with cold, her teeth chattering so hard they hurt. She was about to give up, to dismount and try to find shelter, when a shape materialized out of the white. James, on his massive roan, snow coating his hat and shoulders like a ghost. "Thank God," he breathed, grabbing her horse's reins. "Follow me. Stay close." He led them through the storm with a certainty that defied the conditions. Clara clung to her saddle, trusting him to get them home. When the barn finally appeared, she nearly sobbed with relief. Inside, James helped her dismount, his hands steady even as hers shook. "Can you feel your fingers? Your toes?" "I don't know," Clara admitted. "Everything's numb." His face went grim. "We need to get you warmed up. Come on." He practically carried her to the house, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to give out. Elena met them at the door, already running a bath. James deposited Clara in the bathroom and ordered her to get in the hot water. "Too hot can cause damage," he warned. "Start lukewarm and gradually warm it up. I'll be right outside if you need help." Clara stripped with clumsy fingers and sank into the tub. The water felt like fire against her frozen skin, and she bit back a cry. Slowly, painfully, sensation returned. Her fingers tingled, then burned, then finally started to feel normal. When she'd warmed up enough to trust her voice, she called out. "James? I'm okay." He cracked the door open, keeping his eyes averted. "You sure?" "Yes. Thank you. For coming after me. What did you think I'd do? Leave you out there?" He sounded almost angry. "You're my wife, Clara. I protect what's mine." There was that word again. Mine. But the way he said it didn't feel possessive. It felt like a promise. Later, wrapped in blankets by the fire, Clara watched the storm rage outside the windows. James sat across from her, his own clothes changed, a mug of coffee warming his hands. "I was scared," she admitted quietly. "Really scared." "So was I." His eyes met hers over the rim of his mug. "When you didn't come back right away, when the storm got worse, I've never felt terror like that, Clara. The thought of losing you." He trailed off, but Clara heard what he didn't say. She felt it too, this thing growing between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the foundation love could be built on. Trust. Respect. Genuine caring. "I'm sorry I worried you," she said. "Don't apologize. Just promise me you'll be more careful. Check weather reports before you head out. Carry emergency supplies. And for God's sake, don't try to be a hero. Says the man who rode into a blizzard to save me. That's different." "How?" "Because you're important." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. "You've become important to me, Clara. More than I expected. More than I probably should admit." Clara's heart hammered in her chest. "James? You don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I just needed you to know." The storm raged for 2 more days, trapping them all inside. But something had shifted between Clara and James. The walls they'd both carefully maintained were crumbling, brick by brick. Spring came to Montana with an explosion of wildflowers and new life. The ranch buzzed with activity as calves were born and preparations began for summer. Clara threw herself into the work, her body strong and capable despite the extra inches she'd gained. She was nearly 7.5 feet tall now, and the doctors wanted her to come in for new scans. She'd been avoiding it. Avoiding the confirmation of what she already knew. The tumor was still growing, and soon she'd have to make a decision about surgery. A decision that could leave her permanently damaged, or worse. James knew she was avoiding it. They didn't talk about it, but his eyes followed her with increasing concern, and she'd caught him on the phone with her doctors more than once. One evening in late May, as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, James found Clara in the stables. She was brushing down Thunder, the big bay gelding that had become her favorite. "We need to talk," James said without preamble. Clara's hands stilled on the brush. "About your appointment. The one you've rescheduled 3 times. Clara, you can't keep putting this off." "I know." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to pretend the problem doesn't exist." Clara set down the brush and turned to face him. 6 months of marriage had made them comfortable with each other, but this topic still felt like walking on broken glass. "I'm scared, James. Terrified. What if the surgery goes wrong? What if I wake up and can't walk, can't work, can't be the person you need me to be? The person I need you to be." James stepped closer, his face a mixture of frustration and tenderness. "Clara, I need you to be alive. That's it. That's all. I don't care if you're 7 feet tall or 8. I don't care if you need a wheelchair or a cane or constant care. I just need you here, breathing, living. Because somewhere along the way, this arrangement stopped being about convenience and started being about love." The word hung in the air between them. Love. Clara had felt it growing, had tried to deny it, but hearing James say it out loud made it undeniable. "You love me?" Her voice came out small, uncertain. "How could I not? You're strong and stubborn and brave. You work harder than any 3 men I've got. You've brought life back to this ranch, to this house, to me. Yes, Clara. I love you. I've probably loved you since the day you stood in that barn, shaking like a leaf, trying so hard to be brave. And I'll keep loving you no matter what happens with this surgery. But you have to have the surgery. You have to fight for your life, because I can't lose you." Tears streamed down Clara's face. "What if I'm not strong enough? Then I'll be strong for both of us." James closed the distance between them, his hands cupping her face gently. "Let me help you, Clara. Let me be your husband in every sense of the word. Stop trying to carry this alone." Clara felt something break open inside her chest, all the fear and resistance she'd been holding onto for months flooding out in a rush. She wrapped her arms around James and held on tight, letting herself finally, completely, fall. "I love you too," she whispered against his shoulder. "I think I have for weeks now. I was just too scared to admit it." James pulled back enough to look at her, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Then admit it now. Let me in, Clara. All the way. No more walls. No more pretending this is just an arrangement." "Okay," she breathed. "Okay." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Clara felt lighter than she had in years. The future was still uncertain, the surgery, her health, all of it, but she wouldn't face it alone anymore. 3 weeks later, Clara lay in a hospital bed, being prepped for surgery. James held her hand, his grip steady and sure. "I'll be here when you wake up," he promised. "I know. And then we're going to go home, and we're going to build the life we both deserve. Together." Clara smiled, squeezing his hand. Together. The surgery took 14 hours. The doctors removed the tumor successfully, but there were complications. Nerve damage. Partial paralysis on her left side. The road to recovery would be long and difficult. But when Clara woke up, James was there, just as he'd promised. And in the weeks and months that followed, as she learned to walk again with the help of a cane, as she fought to regain strength and mobility, James never left her side. The ranch adapted. Elena helped more in the house. The hands took on extra duties. James hired additional staff and restructured operations to accommodate Clara's limitations. But most importantly, they faced it all together. 2 years after their wedding, Clara stood on the front porch of the ranch house, watching James work with a young colt in the training ring. She still used a cane, and she'd never regained full function of her left side, but she'd learned to adapt. To thrive, even. James looked up and caught her watching. His face broke into that smile she loved, the one that made her heart skip. He jogged over and climbed the steps to stand beside her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "About how scared I was on our wedding day. How I asked you not to unzip my clothes because I thought you were trying to take advantage of me." James laughed, the sound rich and warm. "And instead I was just trying to fix a stuck zipper." "Instead you were trying to save me," Clara corrected, leaning into his embrace. "In more ways than one." "We saved each other," James said, kissing the top of her head. "That's what marriage is supposed to be. Partnership. Love. choosing each other, every single day. Clara turned in his arms, her cane supporting her weight, and kissed him thoroughly. Then I choose you, James Carver. Today and every day. And I choose you, Clara Carver. My giant bride. My stubborn, beautiful, perfect wife. The sun set over the Montana mountains, painting everything gold, and Clara knew she was finally, truly home. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.